Alright, so in this video, we're going to be going over the process of using Mockaroo to create data for your demo account. This account that we're looking at has already been created, and we're able to get those graphs you see in this dashboard from the data generated in Mockaroo. So the goal will be to switch from this account and build a blank account, take a blank account and build data in there, but not going the manual way. So what we'll be doing in this video is going over how to go to Mockaroo, generate data so we can have a demo account with more information, more graphs that are more appealing to the client when you're doing the demo. So what we're going to do here is pretty much, you can see in this account that I've only done one migration that's allowed me to have leads, contacts, accounts, deals, that kind of stuff. And with that data that I've generated, I've been able to build those graphs you see here on the home screen. So here we have a blank account. And in this account, what we're going to do here is pretty much add data. You can see all the modules are empty. So the goal will be to go to Mockaroo, generate data so we can fill up this account and go over the process of linking accounts and deals and contacts together. So the first thing we're going to really go over right now is make sure that we have that data generated, but we also need to make sure we have the appropriate fields and modules in place. So to do that, if you notice, I'm going to, first of all, separate my Mockaroo screen on the side here, select the module in question that we're going to build first, which is going to be the accounts module. So in here, let's pull up Mockaroo on the left, or the right, I should say, and we're going to create our first schema, which will be the account schema. Now, we want the account schema for several reasons, because obviously the contacts and the deals, we want them to be linked together. So we'll start with that account first. Now, of course, we're going to need some fields like the ID of the account. So account ID, which is going to be a regular expression. And I'm going to put the formula in there. Now, of course, we're not going to need a first name or a last name. And for the formula, it's pretty simple. ZID-CRM accounts. And if we click on preview, you'll notice how I can see now how this is generating an ID for us. Some of those fields we're going to remove. And let's add the ones that are going to be more important to have, right? So some of our mandatory fields like the account name and all that. So we create the account name, and there are more fields that we're going to put in here. Remember, the more information we can put in the schema will make it easier when we create that account to have more data in there, right? So we have account type. Notice it's showing me the different account types in here in that pick list. So I'm going to replicate that in the schema, but we're going to create a custom list here and add the different values. Now, to save time, we're not going to create every single one of them, but I just want you to get into the practice of getting that data in there, right? So let's put a couple of those values separated by a comma, so that now once we create the data, we'll have a bit more variety with our different types of accounts that we're creating in the system. So here we have the annual revenue, right? So how much money is this account making and all that. So we're creating a money field here, and we're going to put some values in there just to give it some variety, right? We don't want every single deal to have the same amount. So we put a certain value in here for how much we expect those companies to make annually or value-wise. We're going to save the schema under the name accounts. And if we do a preview, you should see that everything is saved. But let's go ahead and add our stages, which is as well a mandatory field, right? So same thing as before, this will be a custom list. And we're looking into the CRM now to select the fields or the values for the stages. But what am I saying? We're not even in deals yet. This is not, we're still doing accounts. I am jumping ahead here. So we had the money. Now let's go ahead and do the other fields like city, state, address. And the cool thing with Mockaroo, it will generate that information for you, right? So you don't have to sit there and remember every single state. So here I'm adding states, and it knows, okay, we're going to put US states in here, and we can specify, of course, what we want. Now we're doing our street name. State is all countries right now, but you could specify US. And as you do a preview, you'll see how it's generating that information. Let's move this to the side so you can see a little bit more, right? And notice how many rows I've created. So that will be a lot of accounts. I'm just going to keep it to 10 accounts and make sure that states is set up for US. Let's save and do a quick preview. And now you should see that I have 10 accounts, states and all that is filled, but account type is giving me a random value. Some of them are empty. So let's make sure it's 0. And let's save that again. Perfect. Once you've created this, now we need to save that schema into a data set. This is where the account data set is going to live, right? So if we have everything we need, we're going to download that schema. Once downloaded, we'll go to the data set module and upload that schema. So we're calling it again accounts. We'll select the following question. And you want this because as you're going to link your contacts in your accounts to the accounts, you need that data set to exist. So now we're going to create the contact schema, and you will see how the relationship works between contacts and accounts because we have that accounts data set up. So we're redoing the contact ID again, same expression as before. We're just changing it to reflect contacts. So I'm just going to copy and paste and just change that to contacts. Of course, we will need first name and last name, email, gender, maybe not. So we'll replace this to show, let's say, the account name, because we will need an account name and account ID as well. And on the CRM side, we can look at the other fields that we're going to need. So let's just arrange this in proper order. ID, name, we have first name, last name. Now for the account ID, remember we have the account module already created and saved in a data set. So now it's feeding from the accounts module, right? So we don't have to recreate the account IDs since they already exist in that data set that we saved with those 10 accounts. So now account ID is being fed from the data set. Account name, same thing, right? Those accounts already exist. So we're linking them to the data set and we're asking the system to generate that randomly. Let's save this contact schema. And if we do a preview, you'll notice that it will show you the account names and the account IDs, and it's not generating it itself. It's just feeding from what's existing in that data set that we saved earlier. Now let's create some more data in here. So let's have our cities, our state, and of course we definitely want a zip code in there. And that's the cool thing about Mockaroo, right? So now I can just select city and state and postal code, and that will fill that data for me. So we're getting bogus generated data, so we don't have to do this manual process all the time. So remember how many cities and states that we have to manually create in there. So it's doing a lot of that work for us. Let's save again. Let's do a preview, and notice now, bam, we're getting a lot more data in here. Some of it is being generated, of course, by the formulas that Mockaroo has, but the other ones are feeding from the data set. Now, we don't want 1,000 contacts, so I'll keep it small. Let's say maybe 200. And now we're going to also download that data set so that we can also, that schema, and save it as a data set, because we have another module that needs to be done, which will be the deals module. And that will also need to have data saved in the data set in order to link that. So let's go ahead and do the same thing as we did before. Contacts, select the following question, upload. And now we have our contacts data set created. This brings us now to the last schema that we need to create, which will be the deal schema. So you should have 2 data sets created for accounts in your contacts, and now we're creating the deal schema. So of course, for the deal, we'll need an ID. So we'll just put that in there. We're going to need the name of the account, or ID of the account, I should say. The account, the contact ID, the account ID, the contact name, and the account name are the main ones we're going to need in this. I always suggest to put everything into lowercase. It makes it a lot easier. Now, some of the fields we need for the deal, right? What are those fields? So it's usually best to have your CRM account next to you, so you can always see, are there mandatory fields like the stages that I was already jumping ahead and creating earlier? We will need all those different values in the system. Some of them we just cannot go without. So right here, I'm adding some more fields in there and reorganizing them. So we'll also need a closing date for the deals, right? Which is a good thing to do because you can set up a pretty wide range. If you want your data to not be limited to 1 month or a year, you can spread it out, which makes it more varied, gives you more variety when you're creating those reports for your demos. So contact ID, account ID, I should say, we're going to feed from the data set again. So notice here we have two data sets showing up now, the contacts and the accounts. So everything's pretty much feeding from the contacts, by the way. So even though we have an account in a data set and a contact data set, for the deals, we're feeding everything from the contacts data set. So the account ID, the contact ID, we're taking both of those from the contact data set. Notice I'm doing that right here. Voila. Contact ID, contacts, contact ID. So of course the amount of the deal will be a value. So how much is a deal usually worth, right? So depending on what your business is selling, you just put a certain range here. And then our stages. So we definitely need that. We cannot import data without having the stages because those are mandatory fields. So going back to the CRM and selecting my deals module, I now should have the stages. Voila. Nope, not this one. And here are all the stages, right? So we're just going to create that in Mockaroo. Remember to separate them by a comma. Once we have all the stages created, there's a couple more fields that we need to do, like the deal name. So we would want to make sure we have a name, of course, because without the deal name, how are we supposed to import the data in there, right? So that will be a concatenation that we're going to do for this one. Now the account name and the contact name are also coming from the contact data set. So that one's not too complicated. It's just like we did with the IDs earlier. And the goal here would be, if we have all the fields that we need, right, we save and preview this, make sure everything's right. We would then download this schema in order to start the migration process that we're going to do in a minute. Let's just make sure our closing dates are set. I think everything else looks in order. Let's just save this schema and call it deals. Voila. See deal name, account name. We have all our different values here. This should be everything that we would need for an import. Now we're going to download this and start our migration process, right? So by doing a migration, we can import everything all at once, but also have everything linked and connected to each other. So your accounts would be linked to your contacts and your contact linked to your deals and so on. So let's select the modules that we need here, which are the 3 that we created so far. Yep, we have everything. I don't need the notification. Next. This will start the migration process for us. And as the migration process starts, then we would go ahead and wait for this to finish for us to start mapping our fields here. So now we should see that we have our accounts and our contacts. So that data should be linked in here now. And voila, now we have our contacts, our accounts. And they're all linked.